The big question is always timing. And I think like without the support of Meta, we probably would have been more trepidatious about making investments as significantly as we have in VR, MR, and AR. But once you put the headset on and try it, it's really eye-opening.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Garrett Marshall, president of Xponential Plus. In this episode, we discuss the studio franchiser's digital fitness platform. Garrett details how the company's new partnership with Meta and Oculus help it reach new customers. Plus, we talk about AR and VR workouts, successfully navigating hype cycles, and why in-person fitness remains the gold standard. Let's get into it. The Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by Jack Taylor, our exclusive PR partner. More than just PR, they're creative storytellers and brand builders who actually understand the health and wellness industry. To learn more, head to fit.co/JackTaylor. That's FITT.co/JackTaylor. Hi, Garrett. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation. I think a lot to cover across the fitness spectrum, in-person, digital, what's happening now, potentially where we're headed. But to kick things off, could you just introduce yourself? Tell us about your role at Xponential Fitness, and yeah, we'll get into the conversation from there.
Sure. I want to say to start with, thank you so much for having me. I know I'm sure I've expressed it to you before, but I love Fitt. I think that it really illuminates a corner in our industry that was a blind spot for a long time. So thank you again for inviting me.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Garrett Marshall. Currently, I'm the president of Xponential Plus at Xponential Fitness. Xponential Plus, I'm sure we'll talk about, is our digital ecosystem and digital experience for live and on-demand content. Been in the fitness industry now for over 20 years, and the majority of that time has been in the kind of the technology and software side of the industry.
It's really interesting. Obviously, listeners will be familiar with Xponential Fitness, 10 brands across a variety of modalities in the brick and mortar boutique fitness space, and really kind of honing in on that. What does it look like to provide the modern exercise seeker with like the full offering of experiences and modalities, community-based instructors in person, and building those premier brands? And obviously you sit at a unique place within that ecosystem of saying, okay, but what does our technology, digital, out of studio look like relative to these brands? Just even at a high level, like how do you think about those two things, how they play and benefit each other, how potentially they could work against each other, maybe not at Expo, but like just in general, if you think about them, and yeah, making it work in a way where it's integrated into the business, but also it's integrated into that consumer experience.
Yeah, sure. As you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, like, we're all in that position where we're trying to learn and figure this out, and you dump a little COVID in, and that's kind of had an impact on consumer behavior. So it's an interesting time, and I don't think anybody's got the magic bullet or the magic answer. And so we, like everyone else, is watching and learning along the way. At a very high level, yeah, as you pointed out, we have 10 brands in the portfolio now. They're all boutiques, so they're kind of in that 1,500 to 2,000 square foot retail footprint side, about 3,000 of those operating today, with 6,000 sold and obligated to open. And my world is the digital experience. And I actually joined Xponential about 5 years ago now. This is the area that I've come from, and I bumped into Anthony Geiser, that is our CEO, and he had a vision all the way back then, so well before COVID, of transforming the business, which at the time I think we had maybe 7 brands, transforming the business beyond just a location-based franchise concept. And so I give him a lot of credit for having that forward-thinking vision. And for me, like personally, I've always been passionate first as an individual and then in my career about the impact that fitness has on well-being. In particular, just that sense of power and control that you get when you feel healthy, and just as we all know, it makes you, it helps you perform and improve everywhere. And so providing that to other people and sharing that with other people so they can get that, you might call it an endorphin rush, or that same sense of self-confidence and self-discipline and control and power, all those things. That's been what I've tried to center my career on. And as technology has evolved, it's made it possible for all of us to get closer and closer to the consumer to kind of invoke those benefits. And so I was working before as the CEO of a company which I helped found called Fitness on Demand. I was actually had a couple meetings with Anthony. I was had my sales hat on, and that was the nature of those conversations. And his vision for building this omni-channel business was quite different than like the problems we solved in the old business. But it was that perfect opportunity to move closer to the end consumer. So we launched our digital platform B2C, and now we've built that out to be both B2B and B2B to C. But anyways, to get, I guess the short, kind of like very high level, macro level answer to your question would be that, you know, our mission statement is to make boutique fitness more accessible for consumers everywhere. And that's probably the best way to frame how we look at all these different experiences and channels in one ecosystem. And so our view and philosophy is like there are differing customer needs, particularly that have been constraints for boutique fitness historically. Time costs money, and you know that obviously in your line of work. And so digital became a really obvious antidote to help us reach more consumers while addressing those constraints that had been historical challenges for the growth of the boutique industry.
Yeah, it's interesting as you think about the consumer kind of hurdles, challenges, barriers to entry, whatever word you want to use, um, and then reaching them where they are, reaching them at a price they can afford, making it convenient across all of those things. You know, it's I think as you know this better than anybody, but anybody who's in that kind of fitness, whether they're going from in person to digital, digital to in person, like figuring out where to meet people and how to meet them, there's trade-offs, right? There's trade-offs in the quality of the workout, the instruction, the experience, what you come to value in each of those things. Is it social? Is it engaging? Are you getting the motivation? And I think a lot of different operators, as you talk about them, especially even if we just frame it through like COVID times, right? It's like they're launching digital as a stopgap measure because they really can't do anything else and it's better than not having an experience whatsoever. But now that we get back into this world of like, you know, obviously gyms are back open and people are going through their normal experiences, do you think of it as like an additional touch point for that existing member, a funnel for new members to potentially getting into the studio, something to reach people that may never come into the studio? And even beyond like that framing, like, do you have a sense of who's using Exponential Plus now in terms of are they supplementing their membership? Are you finding them for the first time and it's that gateway to in person? How is it working within that ecosystem as it relates to like those challenges and trade offs?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk too about the impact on the digital industry post COVID, because I haven't heard anybody really talk about that subject. I mean, we all talk about the pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, but the impact, the unfortunate impact that it's had more broadly on digital fitness, which would be an interesting topic. But to answer your question, the vast majority of paying subscribers on our platform are not currently members of a studio, which may surprise people. For us, it's both, though. I mean, I would say the business imperative for continuing to invest in the digital platform is really to reach broader and deeper, to engage with consumers who either currently aren't customers in a physical location, or people who've never engaged with our brands before, right? So, just to we could double click for a minute. I was saying, some of the constraints that have historically plagued boutique fitness, it's a more expensive membership offering. So typically, if you go back 5 to 10 years, they're only in big cities or very coastal. It was a very coastal business. Because it's expensive, it's expensive. So you naturally rule out some consumers just based on the cost alone, right? If you're in a big city, you have to charge more. Rents are higher, all these kind of things, right? So those two kind of go hand in hand. And inherently, boutique fitness is typically class based. All of our modalities are class based, which, like you'd expect, you've got class times at the peak times of the day, the early morning, early to late afternoon. And so if that, as a consumer, if that doesn't work with your schedule, then again, you're ruled out, right? Digital solves all of those things, right? You can do it anywhere, anytime. It's low cost and it's accessible. So for us, it really provides like a top of funnel utility for driving impressions and reaching new customers. And then we believe like the studio experience is the pinnacle of all experiences. It's an environment. All of our studios are environments that are purpose built for that modality. We control the full sensory experience. You're there with a tribe and a community of people who share your same aspirations. So you get that motivation, that tribe effect. But because of all those things, it's also more expensive. And so for us, it's, our aspiration is to engage with people and work as many of them down that funnel as possible. But in order to reach the broadest audience, you've got to tap into these experiences. It'd be like I think I've made the analogy before. It'd be like if you're a recording artist and you're like, an MP3 is not as good as the concert, so I'm not going to record music, right? I'm just going to do concerts. It'd be like that would be it would probably be a great experience, but it'd be probably a fairly short-sighted strategy in terms of reach.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. And I have heard you kind of frame it that way before. And it's something that I have also used and pointed other people to as like, it isn't an either or. Like it's not, you don't have to have this black and white decision. I think the thing that kind of put everybody in a little bit of a pretzel is like during COVID, and we'll get to this, like what is the current state and how has that kind of played out, like is that they almost found themselves second guessing, like, well, is in person, what are we going to be able to do it the way that we used to do it, and how quickly is that going to come back? And if not, we have to make this pitch for digital and digital only because it's the only thing we have right now. And whether that was to convince themselves or consumers or the market or investors, like that was kind of the line that you heard. And there were some people, Anthony, and you guys at Xponential being one of them, that said, no, this is coming back. It will always be the thing. We will get back to normal sooner rather than later, and in person being the pinnacle of that. But yeah, it was interesting times, obviously, to hear the kind of rationale and people talking themselves into having to make this choice between in person or digital.
I think that's the biggest risk if you're an operator that's trying to figure out how this fits in. And um, again, we could talk about post-COVID era and the future and stuff. And I don't think like if you're an operator that's very invested in brick and mortar, verticalizing and including digital and all these other channels of experience and owning it may not be the right way to do it. But that doesn't mean you should ignore it. I actually think the biggest risk is to misperceive consumers and put them in one of two buckets. I'm an in-person, or IRL, as I think that we were joking about the terms. That I think that's become the nomenclature. IRL, or I'm digital, and it's binary, right? Like that. You just have to. I mean, literally, go step in your gym, talk to customers, and you'll learn really quickly that's not the case.
Yeah, and maybe just one more question before we transition to this, like forward looking or maybe even transitional periods. Like I was curious about thinking about the studios as they exist, and that being the pinnacle in many ways, but having to create this experience that, as you said, many people have never been in the studio, or maybe they certainly don't have a membership now. How then do you leverage that brand? And in my mind, when I think, like a cycle bar, it's like I have a pretty clear concept of what that is because of the studio, not necessarily what the digital experience might be. And same thing with, digital only brands. They have kind of celebrity A-list instructors who are, they're not kind of confined to that local studio where you would have only met them if you were through that studio. So you're having to leverage the brand in a new way. You're having to recreate that experience. Is it anchored in the studio, or is it a totally independent workout instructor experience that they're getting on the digital platform?
For us, our product strategy has been the prior. And I wish I had something super creative to share in that regard, but I was the fortunate beneficiary. We've got these brands with great proof of concept, right? So we know that consumers like the workout, and our consumers, love the workouts that we offer. We actually have trademarked class categories within each brand. Typically, a brand will have 3 to 5 of those, and those evolve over time, but they stay consistent for a considerable amount of time. And so we were fortunate that consumers said these are effective scientifically, they're providing results, but they're also really entertaining, and entertaining as a result of the deep bullpen of people that we have who work on the education teams, who build out move by move, they choreograph the music, and then they have this massive job of making sure that that experience is consistent in all the locations around the world. And so all of that existed before we launched into digital. And I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but when I saw that, I was like, hey, we don't have to go out and try to convince consumers that we've got that, follow Peloton, follow the other leaders in the space, whatever. Let's tap into what we know already works, and do our best job to broadcast that digitally, bring that experience like digitally. So we follow the exact same class categories for the most part. We do live classes every day. Again, we schedule very similar. There are some adaptations that have to be made. One of the, there are obvious adaptations, like, the joke I just make is you can't do hot yoga in your house. So that's scratched, right? And the other one I would say, the other major modification is typically time, because our sweet spot, and I think this is true for the industry, typically is around 20 minutes in length, where an in studio experience, you're driving, you're finding a parking spot, all these things, right? Typically, you're expecting probably 30, 45, or 60 minutes, where digital consumer behavior shows over and over, and it's been consistent for a long time, that they want that bite sized experience.
It does open the door in a way with that flexibility that it's really limited in the studio, because that next class is like they're outside and they're coming in, where you have the format flexibility, even if you do have the kind of proven programming and engineering it the way that you want to. When you think about now, if we kind of transition and look ahead, we talked about, you mentioned IRL, purely in studio, brick and mortar, the omni-channel, hybrid, all these words again that were part of this, like everybody figuring it out and mashing it together to make something that works for them in that moment. And now we're kind of in a new moment. What is the status quo, the industry standard, where things are evolving to relative to you have a brick and mortar operator, boutique fitness, and now this whole world of digital is at your fingertips, and certainly pushing into virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, all the things in between. Where should operators even start? Where are where how do you think about this evolving landscape, and even defining digital fitness in this moment?
That's a that's a good question. There's a lot there. Let me two immediate things come to mind. So remind me that there's two, because I might forget the second one. But first thing I'll say is that the general trend line for digital fitness is clearly up and to the right, right? And I think that gets overshadowed by a lot of the public market conversation. COVID really hurt digital fitness. A couple things happened. A few of the mainstream, the Peloton, as an example, right? They failed to plan for the backside of the bell curve, right? I think if that didn't happen, they'd be in a very different spot right now. I think also too, like for legacy and incumbent operators who jumped into digital as a means to an end, they got hurt too, because they built from the ground up without a top down strategy. You said it perfectly at the very beginning. It was a means to an end. And so as soon as the world turned back on, there suddenly you had to look at it and go, I've got to run this like a real business, which requires a completely different set of skill sets and core competencies, right? So I think, digital has got, maybe a negative rap or negative connotation following COVID from that, but don't let that fool you, right? Because the way we see it, the market opportunity the addressable market for digital is enormous, right? A stat that I keep hounding on trying to evangelize with people is, I think it was about a year and a half ago, Forbes said 74% of Americans use at least one digital fitness app. So you call that 250 million people, compare it to the gym industry of 60 million people or 65 million people, and that'll show you the white space, right? And I think that that's really overlooked by the legacy industry. I think they pay a lot of times have a tendency to pay attention to the headlines and not what's happening with consumer behavior. Like what is really happening today with consumers? And yeah, actually, I thought of a third point, but the second part of your question about like what does the future hold? I think there is a risk factor. I think that the competitive factors, the set of factors that digital fitness competes on, now that things are starting to stabilize, I think that's shifting too, right? So, like if you're jumping into digital fitness right now and you're thinking about how do we create great looking content, make it look really cool, have excellent instructors, this is I mean, you would know better than anybody because you guys keep your finger on the pulse of the developments and the innovation and the investment world. There's tons of them, right? But the great looking talent, fun workouts, great production quality, those are table stakes. Those aren't even competitive factors anymore. It'd be like if you're trying to sell a car and you're like, we've got windshield wipers, air conditioning, and a radio, right? So what I see happening is I think great content, diverse, and also there's been massive overdevelopment of content, right? That's another competitive factor that you have to have enough content. Think of it the way I would describe it is think about mainstream entertainment platforms like a Hulu, Paramount Plus, Peacock, Netflix, etc., HBO Max. Like you have to have enough content so that when the consumer opens up your app, right? They feel they have some sort of interest in their mind. I want to laugh. I want to watch, a mystery, whatever. You've got to have enough variety to serve them with that exactly at the right time so that they feel like they're getting value every time that they come back. The consumer is not, evaluating you by looking at your video count and going, Max has 14,153 and right. And so I think companies, and I won't name any names, but some of the companies that are struggling today, a big part of it is that they were way overdeveloped in content production when probably where they should have been focused was on more personalization and meeting the customer, serving the customer with what they need at exactly the right time. So I think that's a change. There's a change in competitive factor set. I also think that the definition of digital fitness, because of that change in competitive factors, is going to take on a completely new definition. I think in the world of fitness apps, there's going to be much greater personalization. One of the things I talked about recently is this idea, and I'm still working this concept out in my own head, but this idea that for like the last 5 to 10 years, we've been so focused on the input of data. So we have wearable devices, we have new diagnostic tools, we have mobility assessments, we have biometric screening, and other performance markers are now moving it. You can now find those on through a scan on the camera of your smartphone, right? So we're collecting all this data, but there hasn't been a huge amount of improvement on the output from that data in by way of prescription and personalization and all the things that you can actually do with that data. That is where I think the next 5 to 10 years are. Oftentimes in our industry, we think about digital fitness as streaming workouts, like the actual product content. Product meaning you take this content, you actually use it for a purpose, right? I think innovators and those that lead the industry, they're going to have a much broader view of digital fitness, right? And that comes from I keep hitting, maybe beating the same drum here, but from really knowing the customer. It's going to be, leveraging digital as a better communication medium for your customer, better understanding your customer and their behaviors, right? And as I said already, just serving them with what they need at exactly the right time.
Hey everyone, we'll get back to the show in just a second. But first, I wanted to tell you about our exclusive PR partner, Jack Taylor. Honestly, this one's a no brainer. We've known the Jack Taylor team for years. They work with some of the most innovative health and wellness companies. We're talking Whoop, Athletic Greens, Hyperice, and many more. Jack Taylor has an extensive industry network, knows how to work with high growth companies, and really invests in building long term relationships. I know this firsthand because they're Fit Insider's PR agency, so I can confidently recommend them, and I do all the time. From startups to more established brands, they go beyond pushing product to help companies truly thrive. To learn more, head to fit.co/Jack Taylor. That's FITT.co/Jack Taylor. Now back to the show. Yeah, so much there, so insightful. Thanks for kind of walking through that, and it'll be interesting, certainly, to see how it evolves. But yeah, touching on a number of things that you mentioned there, and tracking the space, and thinking about this shift, and trying to, whether it's from I'm just so personally interested in it, invested in the industry that I want to see what happens, with my investor hat on, thinking about, okay, is this the right thing to be betting on at this moment? There hasn't really been anything that jumps out and kind of answers that question of like, but what is going to get the person to take action on this, right? You still have to get them to open the app. You still have to get them to want to click on it. You still have to get them to finish that class that they're taking on whatever ever the modality is. And so cracking this code on behavior and adherence and like really delivering results, it's like we are kind of running up against a wall in terms of like content and instructor and music. And like you said, that our workout library has 10,000 videos. It's like, but if you can't get them to click, and it's not the workout they want, and it's not the thing they want, and it's not resonating with them, then what do you do? Like, then why are we producing all this content, and what's the point in the first place? So I also don't know what the answer is, but I do think it is that that output that you spoke of. Like, what are we doing with all the information that we know, that we're collecting? The next step beyond saying like, this content is now available, this workout, this modality, this playlist, like there has to be what's next. And maybe, maybe I'm kind of like, this is a leading question in terms of where technology is heading, but yeah, I'm kind of at a loss as well.
There have been so many projections and thoughts for many things historically that have been wrong. I don't know the answers. But I think AI, these are the areas where AI has tremendous potential. Looking back, I remember probably about 10 years ago, we started to see, and I remember some of this, I think, maybe emerged out of the healthcare world, where you had companies coming in and they said, "Oh, there's an application in fitness. Let's take behavioral science and see if we can get people to exercise more, exercise right, all these kind of things, right?" And I remember this little pocket of time where I was getting contacted by, or I was aware of companies like this, and then it seemed like they kind of fizzled out. And it is interesting that you've seen some of the investments, and you've got companies like Apple that are so invested in like their technology, and now with Apple, and all this stuff. And you really, at the ground level, you haven't seen a lot of change in the way consumers behave. The way I kind of frame it is, take the modern technology out of the equation. What is it that drives consumers to act? Oftentimes it's just simplicity. If you can remove friction and make it easier for them to do it, it's just like, if there was a magic pill today to get in great shape, everybody would take it, right? Because it's easy. And so that's where I think AI has an opportunity, because, like, to carry on your example, you can serve workouts, right? And you hope that you hit the consumer with the right workout, a modality that they like, the duration of time that they actually have the availability for, whatever. But there is a future ahead where, and don't ask me because I don't know how soon or how far away this is, that I should see your calendar, right? And without you even having to open the app, why would I not hit you with a push notification and say, "Joe, you've only got 30 minutes, right? Here's a 20-minute workout that was, hot off the presses," sort of thing, right? And that's a pretty simple use case, right? But you can see how there is a line of diminishing return when it comes to just using data science to try and force people to do stuff. But I think the more friction that you can remove, it's going to be really, really great advanced technology under the hood. But if you can make it appear simple to the consumer, that's the white hot moment, or the holy grail, I guess, for better expression.
Yeah, this has kind of come up in a couple of different conversations and a couple of different aspects of health and wellness and fitness, but this idea of, yeah, your Apple Watch kind of pings you because it saw on your calendar, here's what you need to eat for this workout that's coming up at this time, and it's adjusting the workout because maybe you're not as recovered as maybe you otherwise you are on a typical day. So that type of like health coach co-pilot that's right there kind of doing all the eh, calculations, the planning, the ordering the meal, coaching the workout. Like you said, I don't know when that's coming, but the idea of having that, it's like, to me, is like pretty priceless. Let's just keep going down this path and jump right into, from a technology standpoint. You recently announced, Exponential did, that partnering with Meta and thinking about going into the metaverse, whether that's mixed reality, augmented reality, whatever the future of the kind of the Quest experience is. Yeah, can you just kind of frame up what that partnership was, and what it means for you as a brand, but also potentially members, exercise seekers, yeah, just people in general?
Yeah, it's a really cool experience. For us, we had talked a little bit earlier about kind of the funnel, and at the top we have digital, and at the bottom we have our in-studio experience. And we can talk about some of the technology too, because there were some breakthrough technology features that enabled this to happen in the Quest 3 headset. And without those, it wouldn't have been possible to do to create what we've created now. But that app kind of lives in the middle, right? So you get all the efficiencies that you get with digital fitness. You can do it anytime, anywhere, low cost, all those things we've already talked about, but you actually get some of the immersion, and we can recapture some of the experience in VR, AR, MR that normally is sacrificed with just standard digital fitness. So for us, it was like this exciting middle ground that can live in between those two worlds. All that, I will be honest and say, is set against a backdrop of the opportunity to reach more consumers. When we went into this, we started with Meta about a year ago. So they selected us to, as one of just a few app developers, to build an experience that fully showcased the new technology, which is in the headset that was just launched last month in October. So when we entered that relationship, it was pretty clear from the beginning that the demographic in the Quest marketplace was in complete contrast to the demographic that we serve in our physical studios. Like, it was pretty much black and white, with some kind of overlays and overlap in terms of age. But that was also the silver lining for us, because it represented a new opportunity to, as I've said now, reach more consumers. So we looked at it as a growth opportunity, right? And the app experience launched about 3 weeks ago, and maybe even just 2 weeks ago, actually. Now it launched on November 2nd, so 2 weeks at the time of this recording. And there's already been a lot of learnings in the engagement that we've seen so far across the demographic spectrum, gender, the length of streaming, the install to download rate, and I could just go on and on and on. But for us, that's how we look at it. The full color pass through, the depth perception, the mixed reality features that have been made possible and brought to life in the hardware that's inside of the Quest 3. Those were really the game changers that allowed us to even entertain this. Prior to this technology, what you've seen like a lot of game first, fitness second experiences and that makes sense too, not just because of technology hardware limitations, but just because of that core community, right? For our modalities, especially for like the cardio brands, Cycle Bar where you're on a bike, or Stride where you're on a treadmill, it's like you can't really do that in a fully immersive experience, right? It wouldn't be safe to do that. And so what they've enabled with this new technology has allowed us to do real fitness, right? And there are lots of ways we can get into, depending on how much you want to talk about it, that we are gamifying the in studio experience to make it more immersive and to just make it more fun in the headset. But we have led with the positioning of, this is a fitness first experience, just like what you'd get in the real studio, brought to life in VR.
Yeah, there's like this, even if you take this segment, as you mentioned, and thinking about the demographic and the exposure that you're getting to people that not they're not coming into the studio and they're not on Exponential Plus. Like, and I'm sure, again, there's like some overlap in these categories and demographics, but like then opening the door to like these other people, that how else would you reach them? And that's kind of always where I've sat relative to any emerging technology or platform around health and fitness is that it's going to be the thing for someone. Just because maybe you don't enjoy it, you would prefer to be in person, or you can't imagine using an app or using a headset. Like, that doesn't matter, because there's this entire population of people who are otherwise, if they're not inactive, they're certainly not exercising as much as maybe we would hope that they would. Like, and this is a way to engage them and then put them into that funnel and set them hopefully on a path for a healthier lifestyle. You mentioned like these learnings in terms of who's accessing it and how. What type of feedback are you able to get? Like, how, what does that kind of communication or access to that end consumer look like? And maybe even at a high level, could you expand on like what you're able to then do with those learnings and how they inform like how you're thinking about where this technology, where this experience is going?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Quest, the marketplace, Meta's marketplace, has a developer portal like iOS or Android or any others would, and there's a subset of information in there, and that's developing because Quest, relative to say like an iOS, is a pretty young marketplace, right? And so there's a lot of development on their site that's just happening to improve what developers have access to. One of the benefits of Quest is, Facebook owns Facebook, they own Instagram, they have WhatsApp, and oftentimes users reveal quite a bit of information about themselves through their accounts on those platforms. And so some of that filters through to the Quest marketplace. Our hope as a developer, along with other developers, is that that continues to increase over time, right? So those are interesting data points that don't exist in every other marketplace. We do, for the Exponential Plus product, we do business on 9 other operating systems. So and most of those would be considered limited in terms of what's available data wise through the marketplace. And then for our app ourselves, we have all sorts of tracking mechanisms built into the app experience, like we would in any other Exponential Plus app. We use Amplitude as an example, so we see almost everything. What you look at in the headset, what you click, do you finish it? Your selection history. I just literally almost everything, and so we use that data to inform obviously content production. Our ecosystem is universal. So if you subscribe on Roku or Apple TV, as an example, that subscription gives you access to every app that we have. Same with MetaQuest. So if you subscribe there, right? And so we use that information as well. We look at the consumer, we can see across like what are their viewing behaviors, right? What apps do they use, and are there any trends or patterns or insights in that, right? On the weekend, they're streaming on their LG TV, or right, or and during the week maybe because they're working from home. I'm just making this up, but we use that cross-channel information basically as customer intelligence and product intelligence to inform engineering and content production, namely.
When you think about the, much like during COVID when we saw digital and connected fitness, kind of this gold rush and a lot of kind of excitement around it, there was also a wave of VR and certainly VR fitness that was in there. And now I don't know if you want to call it like a reset, or maybe somewhere in that hype cycle of now it's shifting to the, augmented reality, mixed reality. Is this, are we still somewhere on that arc of like the first hype cycle? Or are we somewhere in a new one? Where are we relative to like, okay, this is mainstream in a way where like it is played out, where people are spending like a disproportionate amount of time like in a headset and certainly doing fitness as part of that experience?
That's a great question. And I think the hype cycle is a fantastic framework to use for thinking about it. When we started with Meta, they just within their own technology, there were already over 30 million headsets in the field. And so that was the population or the audience that we said, wow, that's an incremental opportunity, right? And the way I thought about it is I said, look, let's stay true to what we do, what's made the brands great, right? And that may not be a great fit for every Quest user. Let's say that 20% of that population would appreciate having a fitness first experience in the marketplace. We can be a really big fish, the only fish, in fact, within that small pond, right? Because no one else at the time was delivering real fitness, and especially mainstream brands that had high consumer awareness. Here's another maybe paradigm to use. you're familiar with crossing the chasm, right? The technology adoption curve. I think we can probably think about this initial population, that legacy population that were really the early adopters with VR. Tend to, gaming is the number one category, and interestingly enough, when we started with Meta, fitness was their number two app category, second only to games, which was very obviously very intriguing. So I think maybe the better way to think of it is we are in an early adopters phase of these technologies. You've obviously paid attention to Apple's announcement about the Vision Pro. Sony's in the space. Pico. There's a lot of big businesses who are making major investments here, and the reason they're doing it is because they know that this technology will be mainstream. Right? Everybody thinks it's really silly right now, and they all know it, right? It's a race to see who can get something that the mainstream consumer is not going to be afraid to wear. You may have seen also we were at the Meta Connect event back in late September, where they debuted and have continued to really promote their relationship with Ray-Ban. And I don't know if you've seen those glasses, pretty cool. They're I think all of this stuff is very, very early. What's interesting about the Ray-Ban though is they look like normal Ray-Ban glasses, and some of what what Mark Zuckerberg demonstrated with those is really, really interesting. I mean, he did a demonstration at Connect, and right now the glasses, so the frames are touch sensitive, so you can use different touch gestures to control glasses, but the primary interface is audio, right? They don't have any augmented reality yet in the lenses. That is going to be coming very soon. And what he demoed at Connect event was a little scenario where a user with the glasses on was looking at a leaky faucet. He invoked Siri, asked, "How do you fix this?" And up in the vision field came the steps for how to repair the leak, right? So pretty simple use cases, but it just gives you a glimmer into where these things are going. So the big question is always timing. And I think, like, without the support of Meta, we probably would have been more trepidatious about making investments as significantly as we have in VR, MR, and AR. But once you put the headset on and try it, it's really eye opening. Like, it is a really cool immersive experience. I've never seen anyone try the technology and go, "Oh my," like, and not kind of gasp and go, "This is amazing."
Yeah, following up on that, I think a couple things there. Like, the partnership with Meta, obviously, that's a huge kind of like leg up on the competition and puts you in a great spot. A smart move, given that that was there in the first place. And then this idea of early adopters, right? Either from a brand, right, being kind of early to the space, or from a consumer who's getting in, like, and experiencing it and where they are. The next question comes, because if we do think about it in this either as a crossing the chasm or as like a hype cycle, it kind of puts us back in some ways to like this digital fitness conversation of like, okay, then how do you make sure you don't over index on thinking that like this is where things are going, such that like, you're out ahead of your skis and like not able to adapt if it does take a little bit longer to get into the mainstream. So how are you like kind of hedging your bets to say like, okay, we're doing it, we are investing in the space, but like we are aware that it could take maybe longer or shorter to play out in a way where it gets mainstream? How do you avoid like kind of this falling victim to the hype cycle?
100%, totally. So important. And, that timing has always been a challenge. And one of the points that I was going to make, it just came back to me, is I think one of the exciting drivers right now for VR, AR, and MR, I think that productivity, app development and entertainment is really going to propel the acceptance or the adoption of this technology. And if one of the things Apple did really, really well, if you have watched the Vision Pro commercial, they don't touch on or even say the word games, right? They are showing productivity features, they're showing entertainment. And I just, in my family and on my team with my coworkers and so forth, I show them that and listen. And what I hear is all of a sudden light bulbs start going off and they go, "Oh, you know what? Like, maybe in 3 to 5 years, I'm not even going to need a TV." Right? They're like, we're going to all be wearing these goggles. And why would I have a TV that's 75 inches when this thing, I can be in the game? Right. And so I think Apple's going to be a big catalyst, as will more mainstream applications beyond games, fitness included, driving the adoption of this. But in terms of how to not overdevelop or over index too early, I mean, I don't know what the best answer is. I can tell you how I think about it. For me, it's identifying who your customers are right at this moment and what are the competitive factors or product attributes that they're buying on, right? That would be number one. Number two would be if you're trying to grow your business and expand your business, who's that customer set and what are they buying on? And I think if you pay attention to the performance attributes, then you can at least hedge your bets on really investing heavily in something that takes a while to hatch.
There's a lot to think about in terms of where that technology goes, what the evolution of the kind of customer journey is in that, how that then gets people into this funnel, and just getting back to the kind of start of this conversation, if they go into the studios, if they split their time between all these different kind of experiences and technologies. And wrapping up, and maybe we'll get you out of here on this, as you think about what that means for exponential, like going forward into the future, is it ever a competition or a trade-off of these different technologies versus the studio, even though we've kind of established it like, hey, we want and believe that the kind of in-person experience is the pinnacle? If the consumer is kind of saying that maybe the headset experience is, or the digital platform is, and they're opting for that more than they are going into the studio, as you mentioned, why would I have a television if I could just wear this headset? Does it even come up at this point of like, are we going to have to like kind of have this out in terms of where things go? And maybe how you think about that versus, just the rest of the organization?
It's that's the $1 million question. I think it's the wrong analysis, to be honest. When you think you can only take a virtual environment so far, to the extent of physics right now, right? And so I talk about this a lot with gyms too. It's like a consumer who lives in a 1,000 square foot apartment in Brooklyn, right? They probably don't have the budget to buy all of the equipment that they'd like to have access to, nor the space. So guess what? They're still going to go to gyms, right? Regardless of what happens. I think the probably the far bigger risk or the focal point that everyone in our industry should be thinking about is how to incorporate digital to maintain that first person or first party relationship with the end consumer. That's the big risk right now because digital is the front door and it will continue it will be exclusively the front door in the future, right? And so the risk factor is that if you lose that, and let's just say I think again, I brought this up a few times, but this idea of the competitive factors within a value network or a market shifting, I think the industry's got to be really careful of that, right? Because we've talked about forever, oh, we offer community, we're convenient, we're friendly, people love it, right? And I think that those things are shifting, maybe in favor of convenience. And so if you are banking on just having a box that's really clean and a lot of equipment variety, that's a very low margin and very indefensible business, right? So I think in terms of digital and how we're thinking about it, digital is not even close to replacing what you can experience in a studio. But clearly, we're investing in it because we understand that it's a huge part of the overall customer journey and experience.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good place to leave it. That, look, at the end of the day, digital, in person, VR, like, we're here to serve exercise seekers and people that want to live a healthier lifestyle. And we have to be able to adapt and meet them where they are, and, continue to help them achieve their goals. And I think the brands that think about it the right way, and much like you do, is like, we're going to be wherever they are and we're going to give them a better experience and we're going to help them achieve their goals on that journey. So, it'll be interesting. Certainly, none of us can predict where that goes, but we're here for it. And wrapping up, to check out Exponential Plus Studios, would you point people social website anywhere that they should go follow along, or keep up with you even?
Exponential.com, exponential.plus, plus. You can find me on LinkedIn or garrettmarshall.com.
Absolutely, Garrett. Thanks so much for the time today. It was a great conversation. Excited to share it with the community.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Joe.
One more thing before you head out: help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fit Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.